They were a Muslim family. That fact was not decoration. It shaped rules, routines, expectations, inheritance, and social reputation. It was not discussed. It was assumed. Inside that assumption, she had grown, educated, disciplined, and groomed as future heirs of a business built over decades. When she entered the dining room that evening, there was no storm, no shouting, no cinematic tension. There was food on the table and unfinished sentences. Then she said it. "I was baptized. I follow Christ now." The sentence cut through everything else. It did not ask permission. Fork stopped, not because of shock like in movies, but because every person at the table immediately understood what that meant for name, reputation, and property. The father stared at her the way someone evaluates a contract breach. No panic, evaluation. He repeated her words without emotion, as if verifying a clause. "You left Islam." She answered, "Yes." She did not wrap it in metaphors. She did not blame confusion. She did not blame friends. She did not soften the blow by saying "for now." She made it final. Her father straightened his back. He did not raise his voice. Authority does not need volume when it feels unquestioned.
If you stand up with real Christians, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and comment from where are you watching.
"In this house, our faith is not optional," he said. "Everything you have comes from this family. Our name, our business, our inheritance, our respect. You do not change the foundation and expect to keep the roof." He did not insult Christianity. He did not discuss theology. He talked about order, loyalty, and hierarchy. He spoke like the owner of the house and of the story. His tone implied, "You stepped outside the border." She answered without aggression, "I cannot lie. I believe in Christ." She did not tremble to beg. The tremor stayed hidden in her hands under the table, invisible but real. Her mother avoided her eyes, not out of hatred, but because looking directly at her meant recognizing that the decision was already taken and irreversible. The mother whispered, "This is shame, not like an insult, but like a verdict given by neighbors who had not even spoken yet." Reputation was a court that would awaken early the next morning. The father continued. He moved from emotional language to administrative language with precision. He said, "If you reject the faith of this house, you leave the house. You do not benefit from what you oppose. You do not inherit what you dishonor." His words were measured. No threats of violence. No dramatic gestures. Just rules. He talked about contracts, wills, and signatures. He spoke about the company's shares already drafted. He made it clear that she could choose Christ, but she could not choose Christ and keep the benefits of staying Muslim in public. He wanted separation clear. She saw a small suitcase by the door. That detail was the real wound. They had predicted this moment. They had planned the answer before listening to the explanation. The decision had been made in silence long before confession. That silence had been the real court. Her mother stood, walked to the suitcase, and placed it by her feet. Not gently, not harshly, just efficiently, as if executing a process. No sentimental speech. No plea to reconsider. Efficiency often hurts more than anger because it proves that the person is replaceable. He concluded with the last phrase as one signs dismissal papers. No inheritance, no support, no return until you renounce it. Each condition separated her from the family, not only affectionately, but economically and socially. His refusal was not spontaneous rage. It was structural. It touched bank accounts, property deeds, and social introductions. He looked at her like someone crossing their name out of a list that had governed future weddings, partnerships, and photographs. She nodded once, not in submission, but in acknowledgement of clarity. She took the suitcase. Her hand shook, not from fear of poverty, but from the humiliation of becoming an outsider in the place once called home. Outsiderness is not loud. It is cold and administrative. She turned toward the door. No one reached for her wrist. No one asked for a last hug. He did not bless her or curse her. He simply said, "You made your choice." She answered, "So did you?" The door did not slam. It closed like a file being archived. The house continued as if nothing had happened. That was the deepest form of expulsion. Outside, the air did not comfort her. Air does not heal. She sat on the bus stop bench with the suitcase touching her knee. She was not thinking about doctrines or apologetic. She was thinking about rent, food, and the price of faith when it is not surrounded by applause. She opened her phone. Messages were already arriving. Cousins declared they could no longer be associated with her. Aunts promised her father that they stood with him. None of them asked if she had a place to sleep that night. She deleted each message without reply. Deletion gave back a minimal sense of control. She walked into a small church office the next morning. Not a cathedral, not a spectacle, just white walls and tired chairs. The pastor listened. He did not promise that everything would work out. He did not tell her that God would make her rich. He asked the most practical question possible. "Where will you sleep tonight?" She said she did not know. He called a woman from the congregation, a widow with a spare couch. Arrangements were made in 5 sentences. No speeches, no drama, just care functioning as logistics. She worked the following days at whatever allowed cash to appear quickly. Cleaning jobs, temporary office tasks, students she tutored in English. She had grown up with drivers and accountants. Now she counted bus tickets and coins. She did not regret the baptism, but she felt the humiliation physically, like heat behind the neck when she signed a dress. Temporary. Every form reminded her she no longer belonged anywhere by default. Belonging, she learned, was a resource. Once withdrawn, life became negotiation. Her family did not call, not even to ask if she had eaten. They did something worse. They spoke about her publicly, in controlled ways. Her father explained her case inside the community like a cautionary tale. He did not scream that she was evil. He calmly said she had been misled by Christians, and that Western faith destroyed families. He framed himself as protector, not authoritarian. He repeated that he'd remove her from inheritance for her own good and for the honor of the family. His tone implied moral superiority and financial immunity. He believed money proved truth. He also declared something else, and he declared it confidently, that she would return. He believed Christianity was weak on the practical level. He believed churches would give prayers and no shelter. He believed hunger would educate her better than any sermon. He predicted a time frame. 6 months, he told relatives. She will come back. They nodded. They trusted wealth. They trusted pressure. They trusted shame. They underestimated faith that does not perform but persists. She did not prepare speeches. She prepared resumes. She took night classes that the church volunteers helped her pay in installments. She learned to live without the insulation of privilege. Pride broke quietly, not before people, but before unpaid bills. She refused to resent them, not because she was morally superior, but because resentment wasted energy she needed to survive. Forgiveness was not a feeling for her. It was refusal to let them still govern her every action from afar. Christ was not a slogan. He was the reason she did not collapse when treated as disposable. Weeks became months. The church did not worship her story. They did something harder. They stayed. The widow's living room became a temporary landing strip. The pastor guided her through paperwork she had never touched herself before because assistants once did it. She faced the system directly for the first time in her life. Rental contracts, tax registration, job interviews where last names did not open doors. She discovered a new dignity, one not attached to family wealth, but to work done honestly and faith kept without applause. Her father followed her from a distance without contacting her. Reputation required surveillance. He asked acquaintances whether she had broken down yet. They told him she was still out, still Christian, still refusing to beg. That irritated him not because he missed her, but because her resistance contradicted his narrative that Christianity collapses under economic pressure. He hardened the terms even more. He altered documents to legally erase her from succession lists. He believed he was closing the case forever. She heard about it through a lawyer who volunteered at church clinics. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just a printed copy placed on a table. He explained without sugarcoating. She no longer existed in the family's legal future. The erasure was clean. She nodded. Tears did not come immediately. They arrived later, quietly, while washing dishes after dinner at the widow's house. She did not mourn the money. She mourned how easy it had been for them to cut her out, as if love had always been conditioned property. Yet something else hardened in her posture without becoming bitter. She decided that her life would no longer orbit around her father's approval or disapproval. She chose small, clear goals: a stable job, legal independence, serving in the church office part-time. None of that was glamorous, but it was real. Faith for her was not ecstasy. It was a daily choice not to lie about who she followed, even when truth was expensive. The break with the house was complete now, not just physical, legal, social, symbolic. The man who once introduced her proudly now avoided even acknowledging her name in public. He thought he had won. He thought she had been reduced. What he did not see was that removing her inheritance had accidentally removed his final chain over her decisions. He believed money was sovereignty. She was learning another version of sovereignty, conscience before God. And that was only the beginning of the confrontation that would quietly grow, not through violence or spectacle, but through laws, documents, and reputations colliding. The house had expelled her. The city would soon become the new arena. The story would not be about physical danger. It would be about dignity stripped, challenged, and later restored through patience and law rather than revenge fantasies. But for now, the chapter ended with her folding laundry on a borrowed couch and whispering a short prayer without theatrics. "Keep me standing." She learned quickly that exile from a wealthy family does not end at the door. It follows you into every room where your name is spoken. The siege did not come with shouting in the street. It came with polite refusals. Job interviews that ended the moment employers recognized her last name and then remembered the version of the story told by her father. Landlords that suddenly found another tenant. Former school friends who smiled in public but sent messages later saying, "It is better for us not to be seen together." No threat, just distance. Cold, organized distance. Her father had not told people to harm her. He had done something more efficient. He presented himself as the injured party. The narrative was simple. His daughter had rejected the family faith and humiliated them. He said she had become fanatic and ungrateful. He said Christians had manipulated her for money and attention. He never raised his voice. He said everything calmly over coffee with businessmen and relatives. Calm words travel farther. Soon, she felt the results without hearing the speeches. Doors closed before she knocked. She refused to respond online. No long posts. No attempts to defend herself in comment sections governed by people who already decided the verdict. She worked. She sat in small waiting rooms filling out forms that asked for emergency contacts and had to leave them blank. That box on the page hurt more than any insult. The pastor told her, "Stability is built, not given." He did not promise that following Christ would restore her family. He told the truth. Sometimes faith does not fix your past. It gives you the spine to face it. The church became her circle, not as emotional refuge only, but as a network of practical life. Someone taught her budgeting. Another member helped her prepare for interviews without relying on her family name. They treated her neither as princess nor martyr, just as a person. That equality was strange to her at first. Wealth had always separated her into categories. Now she stood in line for food distribution with elderly members who joked about aching knees. Dignity appeared there, stripped of decoration. Pressure intensified in quieter ways. A relative contacted her, not to reconcile, but to negotiate. He said, "If you simply keep your Christianity private, your father will reconsider." The proposal sounded reasonable on the surface. No one demanded that she change her inner beliefs. They demanded her silence. They wanted the public record clean. They wanted family reputation intact, her conscience hidden. She understood the offer for what it was, an invitation back into comfort in exchange for the removal of Christ from her visible life. She answered with few words, "I will not lie." He sighed and ended the call. Months passed, and the legal aspect of the siege grew clearer. Her father's lawyers amended documents that formally severed her from the business and property. She received copies through registered mail, thick envelopes, official language. No handwritten notes. It was the most impersonal form of rejection she had ever experienced. She brought the documents to the church legal clinic, where volunteer attorneys explained every clause slowly. No drama, just facts. They told her what she already sensed. She had been erased with technical precision, yet something else was happening that her father could not monitor. She became competent, not glamorous competent, necessary competent. She learned to read contracts. She learned the language of banks and rent agreements. Faith did not remove obstacles. It made her stubborn enough to keep walking through them. She stopped counting the days since she had left home. She began counting exams passed, hours worked, forms completed. Progress looked boring from outside. From inside, it was survival. Her father grew irritated by silence. He had expected begging. He had prepared speeches for the moment she returned asking for help. No such moment came. Her absence in his narrative became a problem. If she was suffering, it did not appear publicly. If she was failing quietly. He increased pressure the only way he knew, by broadening the social circle that avoided her. He warned business partners to be cautious of any project connected to her. He used reputation as a tool. He never admitted that he felt challenged by the strength he could not explain. She refused to answer insult with insult, not because she did not feel anger, but because anger exhausted energy needed to live. She prayed briefly in the mornings, not asking for revenge, only asking not to collapse into bitterness that would deform her. She served coffee after Sunday services. She studied late at night. There was nothing cinematic in any of this. Faith was not a speech. It was a discipline of staying honest when dishonesty would make life easier. Then a turning point arrived quietly, almost bureaucratically. A small nonprofit organization partnered with the church to hire administrative assistants. They did not ask about her father. They did not care about her last name. They cared about punctuality and accuracy. She passed the test. She signed a contract with trembling hands, not from fear, from the shock of finally being evaluated for her work rather than her family. That paper was her first independent foothold. Salary modest, dignity immense. News of her employment traveled back to her father through the same channels that once carried rumors of her collapse. He called a cousin and asked a question wrapped in indifference. How is she surviving? The answer bothered him. She was working. She was not begging. She was still Christian. The three statements eroded his confidence that money governs everything. He did not soften. He hardened. He said she could no longer use a family name in any professional context. He threatened legal action if she did. He wanted to erase even the association. She discussed it with the volunteer lawyer. He showed her the limits of her father's threats and the rights she still held. Again, the battlefield was paperwork, not violence. It was not a movie. It was form numbers, signatures, deadlines. She followed every step. She did not dramatize. She complied where she must, resisted where the law allowed. For the first time, she realized that the system her father once controlled could also restrain him. Law did not belong to him. That discovery planted something like quiet courage. Her life stabilized slowly. A rented room replaced a couch. A second-hand table replaced eating on her lap. She began sending small donations to the same church fund that had once helped her, not as repayment, as participation. She no longer lived from overflow. She lived from choice. Christianity, for her, had stopped being a concept the night she left the house. Now it had become a structure under her feet. It did not rescue her from difficulty. It trained her to endure without lying. The siege had not broken yet. Family members continued to avoid her at public events. Her name was still spoken as warning in some houses, but the balance of power had shifted in a way no one recognized immediately. She no longer needed the door. They had closed. And the very systems her father used to punish her, contracts, documents, legality, were the same systems through which he had underestimated both the durability of her faith and the reach of ordinary law. She ended many nights the same way, sitting on the edge of the bed, shoes off, body tired, mind clear, no speeches, no imaginary victories, just a quiet sentence said out loud to reset her own resolve. I will not renounce him. The sentence did not change her situation immediately. It changed her. The siege continued, but its outcome was no longer predetermined. The conflict changed shape. It stopped being only about faith inside a house and became a negotiation of power in public spaces where signatures matter more than tears. Her father had resources, connections, and confidence in both. He believed authority extended wherever his name did. He did not chase her physically. He did something quieter and more effective. He began closing paths she was just starting to walk. Not illegal, strategic, each move wrapped in politeness. It started with a phone call she never heard. A board member of the nonprofit where she worked received a friendly warning. Her father did not yell. He spoke in that patient tone that makes hostility sound like professionalism. He said his daughter was unstable, radical, and a risk to donor relations. He reminded them of his family status. He suggested that association with her could be misinterpreted in the community. He did not demand her dismissal. He simply let the weight of his reputation sit on the conversation. People rarely need orders when pressure is implied. The director called her into the office the next day. The conversation was short. No accusations. Just a sentence that ends opportunities without leaving fingerprints. This is not the best fit for us anymore. They praised her work ethic. They avoided specifics. They offered a neutral letter of recommendation that said nothing concrete. She nodded, thanked them, and left. She did not cry in the hallway. She waited until the bus seat closed around her like a box, then breathed slowly so her body would not collapse around what had been taken again. She went back to the church that evening, not for comfort speeches, but because routine anchored her. She stacked chairs, swept floors, and only afterward told the pastor. He did not rush to condemn her father. He did not sanctify her suffering. He asked, "Do you want to fight this legally?" She said yes, not out of revenge, but because she felt the pattern forming. Pressure, silence, erasure. The volunteer lawyer listened, took notes, and explained what could and could not be proven. Reality, not fantasy. Most of what had happened was legal. That was the point. Power often works through what is allowed. Her father misread her silence again. He thought unemployment would bend her. He saw faith as an opinion one could change under stress. He increased the campaign. He called uncles, community leaders, people who organize events where reputation is built with greetings. He did not insult Christianity directly. He portrayed it as naive and culturally foreign, incompatible with the family's heritage. He repeated that she had been influenced and manipulated. Positioning himself as protector, he looked clean. She looked like the one who had broken something valuable. The real damage appeared in numbers. Savings went down. Rent stayed due. Job applications returned nothing. This was not drama. This was arithmetic. Anxiety showed up physically. Tightened jaw, sleeplessness, the stomach becoming a fist. She kept working small side tasks, but they were unpredictable. The widow she still visited noticed without being told. She pushed a plate toward her and said, "Eat first, then think." Practical compassion became more persuasive than any argument. Then the systemic attack, as the lawyer later called it, made itself fully visible. A bank letter arrived. Her small application for a microloan to stabilize her situation had been denied. The letter cited reputational risk. No explanation beyond that phrase. Reputation had become a financial category. She brought the paper to the church office. The lawyer read it twice. His face tightened. Now there was something tangible. Not rumor, not whispers. A decision in writing. They built a file. Dates, names, copies. He explained calmly that they were not pursuing revenge, but accountability. "Your father is free to disagree with your faith," he said, "but he cannot use influence to sabotage your lawful access to work or banking." She listened carefully. She wanted justice, not spectacle. They did not run to social media. They followed procedures, complaints, regulatory bodies, letters that require responses within fixed time frames. The battlefield became bureaucracy. Meanwhile, her father spoke at a family gathering. He declared that consequences were teaching her humility. He presented her hardship as proof that life outside the family's faith and well collapses. People nodded. A cousin recorded part of the speech on a phone and sent it to her without comment. She listened once, not twice. The arrogance in his certainty was a final push she needed. She stopped doubting herself. She stopped hoping for spontaneous reconciliation. From that moment on, she treated him not as a personal enemy, but as a man accountable under the same law as everyone else. The legal process moved slowly, as processes do. Weeks of silence, occasional letters, requests for clarification. She worked meanwhile. She accepted a night shift at a call center. Unromantic work. Necessary. She learned to speak calmly to strangers who shouted over broken phone plans. Oddly, this trained her for the rest of her life. Staying calm on a line while someone projects frustration at you without knowing your name is an education in dignity. She stayed. She did not quit. One evening, the lawyer called with a new tone in his voice, not excited, just focused. A regulatory agency had opened a preliminary inquiry. They wanted to know whether coordinated reputational pressure had influenced financial decisions against her. The word coordinated mattered. It meant pattern. It meant someone believed the complaint deserved oxygen. She thanked him and sat down because her legs softened for a second. Not victory, just recognition that she had not imagined the siege. Her father received his own letters soon after. Not accusations, requests for clarification, invitations to explain contacts, meetings, calls. He dismissed them at first, calling them annoying paperwork. But annoyance turned into irritation when he realized there were deadlines and penalties for ignoring them. He felt something unfamiliar. Limits. For years, his network had functioned unquestioned. Now the same system he had used as an instrument confronted him as an equalizer. He called her. The first call since the night she left. His voice was controlled. "Withdraw your complaint," he said, presenting it as a reasonable path toward peace. He did not apologize. He positioned himself as the problem solver, the patriarch restoring order. She listened without interrupting. Then she answered with sovereign simplicity. "I did nothing wrong. I will not withdraw." He paused, surprised by the calm. He expected tears, guilt, or nostalgia. He got clarity. The conversation ended without shouting. He said she was destroying the family name. She said he had already done that by trying to control her life through fear and access. When the call disconnected, she did not celebrate. She sat in silence and let the shaking pass through her body without shame. Courage does not remove trembling. It simply chooses the action while trembling exists. Pressure increased briefly. More relatives reached out with the same message be reasonable. Think of the family. Drop this. None of them asked whether she had food in the fridge. Their concept of family stopped where reputation began. She recognized a pattern and refused politely each time. Short sentences. No explanations. No boundary by period. The inquiry advanced. Paperwork replaced rumor. Statements replaced gossip. Her father's contacts were asked to describe conversations. Some minimized involvement. Some told partial truths. A few told the full truth to protect themselves. The picture emerged slowly, line by line, a pattern of pressure intended to block her access to work and finance because of her conversion and refusal to return. This was not a movie revelation. There was no dramatic music, just documented reality. For the first time, he faced consequences he could not negotiate over dinner. Fines appeared as possibilities. Public findings, regulatory reprimands that stained reputation more permanently than rumor ever could. He saw that his strategy had crossed a legal line. His arrogance had turned into evidence. That was the error he had made, believing himself untouchable in a world that still has rules. She did not gloat. She focused on staying steady. Work, church, sleep, repeat. Faith for her was not triumphalism. It was a refusal to become cruel, even when justice leaned toward her side. She prayed one sentence before bed. "Keep me honest when I win, the same way you kept me when I lost." She was not praying for his humiliation. She was praying to survive the complexity of victory without losing her center. The siege had reached a point where it would either crush her or backfire against him, not through violence, through law, through the same social systems he believed he controlled. Christianity had not made her wealthy. It had given her spine and community and the courage to stand without trading truth for comfort. The next steps would expose how much of his power depended on fear, and what happens when fear stops working. The story was no longer about a daughter expelled for her faith. It was about a man confronting the limits of the system he used to punish her, and a woman learning that dignity sometimes was the unglamorous clothing of paperwork, persistence, and an unbroken no. The first real consequence did not arrive with noise. It arrived in an envelope that looked like any other piece of mail on his desk. He opened it with the same casual motion he used every day. The expression on his face didn't change at first. Then the muscles around his jaw tightened. The agency had concluded the preliminary review. It was moving forward with formal action. The language was precise, almost cold. It described patterns of coordinated pressure, interference with employment prospects, and attempts to restrict lawful financial access. There was no moral lecture, only findings and statutes. He felt something he hadn't felt in years. He was being measured by rules he did not write. He called his lawyer immediately. Not a friend, a professional. The lawyer didn't panic. He did something worse. He was honest. He said the case was serious, that the documentation was strong, that recorded calls and letters from institutions created a traceable line of influence. He explained potential penalties, regulatory sanctions, fines, formal reprimands that could affect business contract dependent on ethical compliance. These were not abstract words for him. They threatened the image he had spent years building. The humiliation would not be loud, but it would be public, written into records. His confidence cracked, not because he suddenly felt guilt, but because power meeting limits always cracks. He reacted as he always had. By trying to regain control, he arranged a family meeting, not to reconcile, to strategize. He spoke as if this were a business crisis, not the consequence of how he treated his daughter. He told them that she is attacking us. He said Christianity had turned her against the blood that raised her. He presented himself as victim again. Some relatives agreed. Some avoided eye contact. One aunt asked quietly, "What if she is simply defending herself?" The room went still. He cut the question in half with a glare. The hierarchy reasserted itself. But the question stayed, even when no one dared say it again. She heard about the envelope 2 days later through the lawyer who represented her case. His tone remained professional. He did not dramatize. He explained the next steps. Hearings, opportunity for response, chances for settlement, obligations to comply with outcomes. She listened carefully. She asked direct questions. Not will I win, but what must I do? She had learned something essential. Real strength is procedural. After the call, she sat at the small kitchen table of her rented room and let the reality settle. Justice was moving, not fast, but steadily. She didn't post about it. She didn't call to provoke him. She brewed tea and went to work her night shift. Life continued. The real battlefield shifted to the realm of reputation he prized most. Professional circles. Partners called him, politely concerned, asking if the ethics review mentioned in early notices was true. They did not accuse. They did not condemn. They simply asked questions that signaled that his image was no longer unquestionable. That shook him more than any fine could. He felt dignity slipping, not in the dramatic way of stories, but in the subtle withdrawal of deference from people who once admired him. A pause on the phone line. A less enthusiastic greeting at a meeting. Authority evaporates in small gestures before it collapses in official writing. He made another call to her. This time his tone had changed. Less iron, more calculation. He said, "We can end this if you come home. Family matters should stay inside the family." He presented the offer as reconciliation. It was not reconciliation. It was containment. He wanted the problem removed from public view. She listened again without interrupting. When she spoke, her voice was steady. Coming home does not erase what you did. He insisted that she was exaggerating. He used the word phase. He said Christianity was a moment of confusion. She stopped him with one short sentence. This is not confusion. This is faith. Silence followed, heavy and unmistakable. He tried another strategy. He sent money through a relative as a gesture. The message that came with it was clear without being written. Take the gift, soften the complaint. Remember who provides. She returned it the same day. No note explaining morality. No sermon. Just a transfer back. Her refusal frightened him more than the investigation. He realized she could not be bought. Not because she didn't need the money, but because she had decided that price no longer applied to her conscience. He told himself she had been brainwashed. It was easier than admitting she had simply grown beyond his control. Meanwhile, inside church life, nothing theatrical happened. No spotlight, no applause. She kept showing up. She coordinated schedules, filed papers, answered phones, prayed with people whose problems had nothing to do with hers. That normalcy protected her from pride and despair at once. People there didn't define her by conflict. They saw her as worker, sister, believer. When the pastor finally asked how the case was moving, she answered with few words. He nodded and said only, "Be just, not cruel." It was a boundary she needed to hear. The hearing date arrived. She did not dress to impress. She dressed to be taken seriously. The room did not look like television courtrooms. Fluorescent lights, tired chairs, a clerk who had seen too many cases to be moved by speeches. Her father entered with his legal team, posture firm, face closed. He did not look at her directly at first. To do so would require acknowledging that the person he had dismissed now stood across from him not as a child, but as a citizen with rights he could not revoke. The process was boring in the way real justice often is. Documents, statements, cross-checking, timelines. No shouting, no dramatic confessions. Just a slow, relentless assembly of facts. Calls traced, letters compared, testimony aligned. The pattern they described was unmistakable. Coordinated pressure interfering with her employment and financial access because of her religious conversion and refusal to return to the family's authority. He tried to reframe his actions as protective concern, but concern does not explain corporate warnings and banking flags. The record spoke louder than his narrative. When the decision was delivered weeks later, it came again in writing, clear, professional, firm. Sanctions were imposed. Fines were assigned. Formal reprimands were recorded. Corrective measures were ordered. Most painful for him was one particular line: acknowledgement that his actions constituted unjust interference and discrimination tied to religious conversion. It was not a sermon. It was a legal classification. And legal classifications echo. Contracts notice. Institutions remember. He read the decision alone in his office. For the first time since she left, he felt genuinely small, not destroyed, not ruined, just limited. He had believed his authority could define reality for everyone connected to him. Now a system he did not control had defined his behavior in unflattering, permanent language. He blamed her out loud, then fell silent mid-sentence because even he heard the weakness in that excuse. Arrogance does not vanish in a day, but it loses volume when confronted by consequences it cannot escape. She received the decision from her lawyer. She did not celebrate online. She did not send photos of the document to relatives. She closed her eyes for a second and whispered, "Thank you," not as victory chant, but as relief that injustice had been named accurately. She didn't want him destroyed. She wanted the abuse stopped. That difference mattered to her. Christianity had taught her not to confuse justice with revenge. The law had done its work. Her task now was to continue living. Word spread, slowly but steadily. Some relatives who once repeated his version of events fell silent. Silence, in families, is sometimes the first stage of honesty. A cousin texted, "I didn't know it was that serious." An uncle apologized without using the word sorry, talking instead about misunderstandings. That was enough for now. She did not demand perfect confessions. She accepted small signs that the narrative had cracked. Truth rarely arrives in one dramatic confession. It seeps through fractures and lies. He did something unexpected days later. He called without agenda. No demands, no bargains, just breathing on the line before speaking. Then he asked the question pride had delayed for too long. Why? Not accusatory. Curious and tired. She answered in the same simple language she had used the night everything broke. Because I believe Christ is true, and because I will not pretend otherwise. There was no debate. He didn't argue theology. He said nothing for a long moment. Then he whispered, "I did not think you would stand this long." She did not answer that sentence. Some statements do not require responses. They simply mark a change in the air. For the first time, he saw her not as property gone astray, but as a person who had chosen and borne consequences without collapsing. Respect did not fully arrive, but something close to it, maybe recognition, did. He hung up without resolving anything. Yet the conversation ended differently from the others. No threats, no conditions, just unfinished humanity. The chapter of humiliation closed not with applause, but with normal life resuming under new terms. She kept working. She kept paying rent. She kept serving quietly. He began comply with the sanctions, not because he agreed, but because refusing would cost more than accepting. Order returned, not as order, but lawful order. The same society he once used as a tool had reminded him that even patriarchs have boundaries. And somewhere beneath layers of stubbornness, a seed of reflection had been planted. Not conversion, not sudden transformation, just the uncomfortable awareness that sovereignty over others is limits, and that the daughter he cast out without inheritance had found, through faith and law, a way to stand again without him. He had learned to live with the sanctions on paper, but he had not learned to live with the change in how people looked at him. Wealth remained. Property remained. Status technically remained. What shifted was subtler and sharper. In meetings, people no longer assumed he was always right. They asked for clarification. They referenced ethical compliance with a tone that reminded him of the ruling. He hated that phrase, not because he opposed ethics, but because it reminded him there were now public records describing his actions in unflattering terms. His authority had not collapsed. It had been dented. Dents are permanent. He responded as he always had, with control. He demanded more perfection from his employees. He tightened oversight. He issued longer memos. He spoke more often about honor and family values, as if repeating the words would repair their weight. Yet the more he spoke, the more he felt the gap between what he said publicly and the reality of what he had done. He had used influence to isolate his own daughter because she refused to hide her Christianity. He did not admit it out loud, but the sentence followed him like a quiet presence in empty rooms. Pride fought reflection, and both exhausted him. She continued her routine. Work, church, study, sleep, none of it spectacular. All of it steady. She advanced at the call center, not through favoritism, but through reliability. Supervisors noticed that she took difficult calls without escalating conflict. People opened up to her, not because she preached at them, but because she listened without rushing to correct. Christianity shaped her not through slogans, but through habits. Honesty when lie would be easier, patience when anger would feel good, refusal to return cruelty even when justified by pain. One Sunday, the pastor asked her to share her testimony with a small group preparing for baptism. She hesitated. She disliked public attention. He clarified, "Tell them what following Christ cost you, not the beautiful parts. The real cost." She nodded slowly. That evening, she spoke briefly. She did not dramatize. She described being expelled, losing inheritance, facing coordinated pressure. She ended with one sentence. "Christ did not make my life easier. He made me free." There were no tears manufactured for effect, just quiet recognition among people about to take a serious step into a faith that demands truth. The story reached him indirectly. Someone told him she had spoken at church. He imagined exaggerated speeches about him, accusations, dramatization. Anger rose, then stalled when the person added, "She did not attack you. She only said she chose Christ and accepted the cost." That detail unsettled him. He had expected hostility. He had prepared himself to dismiss her as resentful. But she had not used him to gain sympathy. She had simply told the truth. He felt something new and unwelcome. Shame that did not come from sanctions, but from comparison between his noise and her restraint. Meanwhile, the pressure of silence inside his own household began to fracture. His wife avoided conflict, but she also avoided pretending. She had watched the investigation unfold. She had seen his refusal to apologize. She had stayed loyal in public, but in private meals she spoke less and listened more. One evening she asked, without accusation, "Do you ever think we went too far?" He reacted sharply. "We protected the family." She just repeated, "She is still our daughter." The sentence hung between them like a door half open that neither dared to close or walk through. Her younger brother contacted her next, not with speeches, with a practical question about a course he wanted to apply to. He wrote, "You always explain these forms better than I can." She helped without mentioning the past. Their exchange was simple. Forms, deadlines, requirements. At the end, he added, "I miss talking to you." She stared at the message for a long time before answering, "I miss you too." They did not discuss religion or the house, but a thread had reappeared, thin, real, not controlled by their father. At work, she received an offer to move into a training role. Modest raise, more responsibility. She hesitated because change always resembled risk, and risk still triggered memories of loss. She accepted anyway, reasoning not from fear, but from competence. She had grown, not in dramatic leaps, but in daily increments. She told the pastor only after signing the contract. He smiled and simply said, "Keep your heart clean, advice without performance." Exactly what she needed. Her father heard about her advancement from the same cousin, who seemed to measure his life by reporting news of others. This time, the cousin did not mock. He stated plain fact. She was doing well. The information produced a reaction he had not anticipated. Relief mixed with resentment. Relief because she was not suffering. Resentment because her stability made it harder to justify what he had done. It is easy to think of someone as an enemy when they are either visibly aggressive or obviously destroyed. She was neither. She was steady. That forced him to reconsider narratives he had built around her. Community perception shifted further. People began approaching him with cautious honesty. One businessman said, "Whatever our differences, it is good she is standing on her own feet." Another asked, "Have you spoken with her recently?" These were not attacks. They were invitations to humility he was not yet ready to accept, but they chipped away at his certainty that his version of events was the only one people believed. He felt isolated in a circle he once dominated. His moment of internal confrontation arrived in an ordinary scene. He found, in a drawer he almost never opened, a photograph of her as a child sitting on his shoulders at a park. No symbolism, just a frozen afternoon. He stared at the picture longer than he meant to. He had not changed physically that much. She had, not just from child to adult, but from dependent to autonomous person. The reality struck him. Control had never been the same as love. He had given her comfort, but attached the price of obedience to identity itself. When she refused to pay it, he treated her like a contract broken rather than a daughter grown. He did not become Christian. He did not suddenly praise her choices. But the photograph made lying to himself difficult. His anger thinned. What replaced it was not agreement. It was grief. He had lost a relationship that could not be bought back with money or repaired through command. For the first time, he considered saying words he had avoided for months. "I was wrong." He did not say them yet. Pride still guarded the doorway. But the sentence had finally formed inside him, and once formed, it refused to disappear. She also faced her own interior battle. Justice had come. Stability was emerging. Yet resentment still knocked at the door of her thoughts, especially at night. She imagined delivering harsh speeches that would expose him in front of everyone. She imagined rejecting him if he ever sought reconciliation. Each scenario brought a rush of satisfaction followed by a hollow ache. She recognized the pattern quickly. Revenge promises relief but delivers emptiness. She prayed not to feel sudden love, but to be protected from becoming like the person who had hurt her. "Keep my dignity without hardening my heart," she whispered before sleep. The church continued to be an ordinary community rather than a stage. People argued, reconciled, served, failed, and tried again. Christianity expressed itself there not in perfect behavior, but in repeatedly returning to truth after failure. Slowly, she realized her story had become less about what her father had done and more about who she was becoming despite it. Faith had moved from defense into identity, not in slogans, in choices. The real payback, though she never used that word herself, was already unfolding in a way that no one in her family had expected. Not through her destruction or his domination, but through consequences that exposed his misuse of power and through the undeniable dignity she built without his resources. He had tried to teach her submission through deprivation. Instead, deprivation had taught her sovereignty of conscience. The reversal was quiet, profound, irreversible. He finally called again. His tone contained something missing before: hesitation. He did not begin with commands or accusations. He said her name carefully, as if testing whether he still had the right to say it in a familiar way. Then he said, "I don't know how to fix this." The sentence stripped him of the armor he had worn for years. It did not solve anything, but it was the first honest thing he had said to her since the night she left. She answered gently, "We start by telling the truth." She did not define what the next steps would be. Neither demanded the other's conversion, ideological or emotional. They agreed on truth as ground. That conversation did not heal everything, but something fundamental shifted. The war of domination ended. In its place emerged a slow negotiation of honesty. He would need time to admit out loud that expelling her and cutting her inheritance because she followed Christ had been wrong. She would need time to trust that apology if it came. Yet both now faced each other as adults, not ruler and rebel. Faith had preserved her dignity long enough for this possibility to even exist. She returned to work the next day, answered calls, trained new agents, laughed once at a co-worker's bad joke. Life continued with the calm rhythm of ordinary days. The dramatic parts of the story had passed. What remained was the longer, harder terrain of rebuilding trust and maintaining integrity. Christianity did not promise her that everyone would change. It promised that she could remain truthful regardless of who did or did not. And far away from applause or public spectacle, in the quiet space of his own conscience, he finally began the painful work of admitting to himself that the system he tried to weaponize had exposed him, that law had corrected him, and that the daughter he cast out had not collapsed but stood. Because her faith had not been a phase, and because dignity grows strongest when it is chosen without guarantees. He did not wake up transformed. Change did not arrive like a switch. It came as interruption. Conversations he could no longer finish with authority alone. He began noticing how often he spoke in absolutes. He began noticing how much energy it took to maintain an image of control that no longer matched reality. The sanctions were still in force. Compliance reports were still due. He hated the paperwork, not because of the time it consumed, but because every form was a mirror that said, "You cross a line." His pride tried to argue with the mirror. The mirror did not argue back. At first, he contacted her only to discuss practical matters. He asked whether she still needed documents from the house. He offered to send boxes that had been stored in a closet for months. She answered politely. He listened to the tone of her replies more than the content. It was steady, neither cold nor eager. He realized in what he had broken. Not only trust, but the expectation that she would always orbit his moods. She no longer did. That independence threatened and humbled him at once. Silence used to be his weapon. Now it became his punishment. He sat in his office after hours, long after employees had gone, and allowed his mind to replay scenes he had avoided. Her standing by the table, saying she had been baptized. His refusal to ask why. His prepared suitcase. He had not reacted. He had executed. The memory made his eyes burn, though no tears came. He had prided himself on decisiveness. Now decisiveness looked in memory, like a man afraid of losing control and calling fear principle. She did not wait for him to move faster than he could. She also did not shape her life around his pace. She kept working. She enrolled in a part-time degree program related to counseling. It made sense. She had lived pressure without being crushed, And now she wanted to help others survive their own collisions with families, systems, and expectations. Tuition wasn't easy. Scholarships, church support, extra shifts made it possible. Nothing about her path was romantic. It was built in installments. Her brother visited her first. He waited outside her building, unsure if he should ring. When she opened a door, he looked both older and younger than she remembered. They talked for hours at the kitchen table. Not about theology, about childhood, school, their mother's pauses during dinner, their father's silence where apologies should have lived. He didn't offend what had happened. He didn't attack either. He said, "I didn't know what to do." She believed him. Conformity often calls itself loyalty. He had been a boy caught in a structure much. Their mother called a week later. The call was full of stops and starts. She asked about health, work, sleep, practical questions, because practical questions feel safer than confessions. Near the end, her mother's voice softened. "I pray," she said. She didn't say to whom. She didn't announce conversion. She simply admitted that the situation had pushed her beyond rehearsed sentences. Prayer had become less about boasting identity and more about searching for what was right. That admission mattered more than any argument. He, meanwhile, found his public certainty eroding. At community gatherings, he noticed that people spoke more freely around him. Some disagreed politely. Others avoided moral grandstanding. When he was present, it unsettled him. He used to draw authority from being the loudest certainty in the room. Now, he felt the cost of that posture. Being unchallengeable meant being uncorrectable, and being uncorrectable had led him exactly here. Sanctioned, estranged, facing a daughter who stood firm without malice. He scheduled a meeting with her, not at the family house, not at a restaurant where he felt powerful. At a neutral office room booked by the mediator the lawyer recommended. He hated the word mediator. It implied equality. He wasn't used to granting his children, yet he agreed. He arrived early and rehearsed sentences that began with "but." When she walked in, he stopped rehearsing. Simplicity pushed aside strategy. He said her name like a confession, and then said it again when he could not finish the next sentence. The mediator invited him to speak first. He did not deliver a speech. He failed at his own script. Words that came out were smaller than he expected. "I hurt you." He stopped. Then, slower, "I used money and reputation to force you." He did not use the word because excuses crowded his tongue, but he swallowed them. He stayed with description, not justification. The room held the weight of that discipline. He had never before admitted fault without trying to win the argument in the same breath. She listened without interrupting, the same way she had listened to customers complain about broken service plans at night. That practice helped now. When he finished, she didn't rush to distribute forgiveness like a reward. She spoke in the same style she had used since the beginning. Short, clear, grounded in fact. "You expelled me. You cut me off. You tried to close every path." He nodded. Hearing actions named, without insult, hurt more than any accusation could have. Naming removed his ability to hide behind abstraction. The mediator asked her what she needed. She did not say compensation. She did not ask for inheritance reinstatement. She said, "Truth in front of our family. No more stories about me being misled or unstable. Say what actually happened." The request stunned him by its simplicity and difficulty. Money would have been easier. Public truth threatened his pride more than any transfer of assets. Yet he saw clearly that this was a real debt. He had injured her dignity in public. Repair must also be public. They scheduled the family meeting. There were no banners, no speeches written in advance. Just relatives sitting in a living room that had hosted celebrations and arguments for decades. He stood. His hands, one steady during any negotiation, trembled slightly. He did not hide them in his pockets. He spoke plainly. "My daughter became Christian. I rejected her for it. I removed her inheritance. I used influence against her. That was wrong." The word "wrong" landed like a heavy object on a glass table. No one clapped. No one argued. People just stared at the fact that he, who had been fortress-like, had opened the gate. Some relatives looked relieved. They no longer had to pretend they agreed with his actions. Others looked confused. as if their map of moral certainty had been redrawn in a sentence. His wife closed her eyes briefly, not to avoid the moment, but to savor it. She had waited for honesty longer than anyone else in the room. She had lived beside his pride for years. Hearing him name fall aloud felt like fresh air after a long season of windows nailed shut. She did not turn the gathering into a trial. She did not catalog every humiliation. She said only, "I chose Christ and told the truth about it, and I will not lie to belong." Then she added something she had not rehearsed. "I don't need revenge. I needed this." Her father nodded. He recognized in her tone the authority he had once claimed for himself. The authority of someone who knows the cost of their choices and accepts it without bargaining. Authority unconnected to domination unsettled him, but also freed him from performing power he no longer believed in. Rebuilding did not mean pretending the past hadn't happened. It meant establishing new rules. Boundaries were explicit now. He understood that faith was not negotiable for her. She understood he might never share it. Relationship would exist on truth, not on pressure or dependency. That was the order Christianity had produced in her life. Not conquest, not disrespect, but non-negotiable. The sanctions period eventually ended, as all administrative timelines do. What didn't end was the internal lesson he carried into every decision afterward. He became slower with judgments. He stopped using reputation as a weapon. He asked more questions than he had 10 years earlier. People noticed. Not everyone liked the change. Some preferred the version of him that made decisions without doubt, but those closest understood broken certainty had made him, finally, capable of humility. Her life expanded quietly. She completed counseling certifications. She began meeting with individuals who had been cut off by families for various reasons: marriage, belief, independence. She never centered herself in their stories. She listened. She offered practical help with forms, referrals, appointments. She spoke about faith only the way she lived it, without pressure, without marketing, without fear. Some people asked why she stayed Christian after paying such a price. She answered with the same sentence again and again: because it is true. No embellishment, no debate. Truth, for her, did not require ornament to stand. Years from the night she left the house with the pre-packed suitcase, she walked past the same street and did not feel the old collapse inside her chest. The memory was still there, but it no longer ruled her. She had not been rescued by luck. She had been steadied by faith and surrounded by an ordinary church that showed up when it mattered. The payback that life had delivered was nothing like the revenge fantasies people write about. It was this. The man who expelled her had been disciplined by the very systems he trusted. Her dignity had been restored in public, and her life no longer depended on his permission. He never bragged about the lesson. Pride that learns does not brag. He occasionally told younger relatives, "Don't confuse authority with ownership, even over your own children." He did not mention her name when he said it, but everyone knew. She visited sometimes, never as a dependent, always as someone who could leave at any moment without fear. That freedom changed how they spoke to each other. Conversation that had once been shaped by hierarchy now began, simply, with two people acknowledging each other as responsible adults. On a quiet afternoon, he finally said the full sentence he had avoided even after public confession. They stood at the doorway as she was leaving. He said, "I am sorry." No conditions, no explanations. She didn't rush to reply. Forgiveness, for her, had been a long interior process, not a dramatic gesture. She had already released the debt long before those words arrived. She simply nodded and said, "I know." It was not dismissal. It was acceptance that truth had finally been spoken. Christianity had not promised her restoration in the form of wealth or status. It had anchored her through exile, taught her to navigate systems honestly, and given her a community that acted instead of merely speaking. The story that had begun as humiliation ended as clarity. The home that expelled her did not define her. The inheritance that was taken did not determine her future. Faith had done what her family had not expected. It saved her dignity, corrected injustice through lawful means, and returned the moral burden to the one who had tried to rule by fear. She closed the gate behind her and walked to the bus stop again, this time without a suitcase and without anxiety. The road ahead was not easy. It did not need to be. She had learned the one lesson that changed everything else. Truth spoken with calm endurance outlasts control, and the hierarchy that had once placed her beneath her father's would have been replaced by something stronger and quieter, her conscience before God, unbought. Life did not turn into a storybook after apologies were spoken. Repair work is long, uneven, and sometimes dull. She understood that. He was just beginning to understand it. It is easier to say, "I am sorry," than to live differently every day afterward. Yet change showed itself in small acts. He caught himself before giving orders in conversations that required listening. He paused before using reputation as leverage. Those pauses cost him effort. Habit resists reform, but reform, once begun, makes the old self harder to inhabit comfortably. He invited her to lunch one afternoon, not at the house, not at an expensive restaurant meant to display status. A simple place near her workplace where businessmen and delivery workers ate at the same tables. That choice alone signaled something. He no longer needed surroundings to prove his importance. They sat. He did not rush. He did not interrogate. He simply asked, "Tell me what your life looks like now." She talked about shifts, classes, church responsibilities, rent cycles, deadlines, ordinary life. The conversation surprised him in its simplicity. He had once imagined that separation from family meant collapse. Instead, it had produced competence. He did not say he admired her. He was not yet ready for language that exposed vulnerability so directly, but he felt it. He realized that what he had once called rebellion had in fact been conscience. Conscience is stubborn. It cannot be negotiated with money. He had tried. He had failed. Now, he was grateful for that failure in ways that confused him. It meant his daughter existed before him as a person with convictions, not merely as an extension of his will. Their community, which had once echoed his earlier narrative, adjusted too. No public announcements marked the change. It appeared instead in how people spoke to her when they met by chance. There was less pity in their eyes, less distance, more straightforward respect. A shopkeeper who had avoided her once now greeted her without hesitation. A distant relative approached her at a wedding reception and said quietly, "I judged too quickly." She didn't try to make the moment larger than it was. She smiled and asked about his children. Dignity does not need applause to exist. She graduated from her counseling program later that year. The ceremony was small, folding chairs, names read, applause that ended quickly after each one. She liked it that way. Achievement marked without spectacle. The pastor attended and sat in the back. Her brother came and stood awkwardly near the door until she motioned him forward. Even her mother arrived, slipping into a seat after the program had begun, hands folded tight. Her father did not come. He said he had a meeting. The truth was simpler. He did not yet know how to appear in spaces where his authority didn't shape the atmosphere. That absence hurt, but it didn't undo her joy. She had reached this point without needing his permission. Later that evening, he looked at the certificate she placed on the table during a brief visit to the house. He held it as he would hold a fragile object. He did not speak immediately. Then he said, "You built this alone." She corrected him gently. "Not alone, with God, and with people you didn't see." It was not a boast. It was a statement of reality. He nodded because arguing with reality at this stage exhausted him. Something inside his chest loosened. Acknowledging that she had a life independent of his structure did not diminish him. It relieved him of the impossible role he had tried to play, architect of another person's conscience. She began working with clients who had been estranged from families or institutions. She never led with religion in those sessions. She led with listening. Some were Christians already. Some were not. Some were angry at all religion because of how power had been used against them. She did not defend institutions reflexively. She defended truthfulness, boundaries, and the possibility of living without denial. People sensed that she was not speaking from theory. She had walked the terrain they described. They trusted her not to minimize pain or inflate hope. Through this work, she discovered something else. Pain does not make people wise by default. It can harden or soften. She felt both possibilities in herself and chose, repeatedly, the slower path of mercy without denial. Mercy did not mean pretending injustices hadn't happened. It meant refusing to let those injustices define her future or determine her character. Christianity, for her, was not an escape from reality. It was a demand to face reality without cruelty or lies. Meanwhile, he confronted his own community differently now. When conversations drifted toward using pressure to correct adult children, he did not nod as he once had. He said, "Pressure does not change the heart. It breaks relationship." The men who had once admired his rigidity listened more carefully because they knew he wasn't theorizing. He never retold the entire story. He simply presented conclusions formed through loss, consequence, and slow repentance. His voice had changed tone. Less thunder, more gravity. One evening, she invited him to attend a public lecture at the church. Nothing evangelistic in tone, simply a talk about family reconciliation and law. He hesitated. Walking into the building symbolized more than attending an event. It meant entering a space he had once blamed for stealing his daughter. But he also knew that accusation had been false. It had been easier than admitting he had lost control when she made a decision of conscience. He went, not defiantly, quietly. He sat in the back. No one stared. No one confronted him. People simply treated him as another attendee. That normalcy unsettled and comforted him at once. He listened. The speaker described how power, when misused in families, becomes invisible to those who hold it. He heard his own actions outlined without being named. He did not convert. He did not stand and confess. He did not rush to redefine his beliefs. But he did something harder for a man like him. He stayed seated and did not argue inside himself. He allowed the possibility that he called domination care and coercion guidance. He walked out quietly afterward, not looking for her approval, just holding a new kind of silence, one that grows around truth instead of denial. Their relationship settled into something realistic. They spoke. They disagreed. They respected boundaries. She refused to hide her Christianity. He stopped demanding it. She stopped needing him to understand every piece of her faith. He stopped pretending that understanding was a condition for love. The distance between them shrank without disappearing completely. Some wounds scar rather than vanish. Scars are not failures. They are records of survival. The question of inheritance returned in conversation one day, not as demand from her, but as recognition from him. He said, "The documents can be revised." She answered calmly, "That is your decision, not my need." It was true. Her life no longer hinged on his signature. He realized that this independence made any gift possible in a way dependency never had. If he chose to restore something, it would be generosity, not control. If he chose not to, she would still stand. That realization completed the inversion he had never expected. The daughter without inheritance had become the person in the family least governed by fear. He updated the documents later, not to perform virtue, but because he recognized that original punishment had been unjust. He did not announce it to her immediately. When he finally told her, she thanked him simply and added, "My life does not depend on this." He believed her. He could hear, in the steadiness of her voice, the truth of a person whose foundation lay elsewhere. She had been forced to discover that foundation when everything material fell away. Now nothing could easily unseat it. The wider community interpreted these changes in mixed ways. Some saw in them evidence that dignity and law had corrected excess. Others muttered about softness. He no longer tailored his actions to please the chorus. He had lived long enough with their approval to know its limits. Public opinion had strengthened him once and later nearly destroyed his integrity. He became cautiously indifferent to it. Right and wrong mattered more than applause or disapproval now, even when he struggled to define them clearly. She remained anchored in the same practices that had sustained her from the beginning. Prayer without drama, work without boasting, relationships without manipulation. She visited people in hospitals, wrote references, attended boring meetings where planning mattered more than emotion. In each space, her Christianity expressed itself as presence and truth. not as performance. She felt no need to argue her father into faith. That had never been her task. Her task had been to live honestly before God and others and endure the consequences without surrendering to bitterness. He watched her interact with others and learned, slowly, a different definition of strength. It did not look like command. It looked like consistency. It looked like a person who says no when pressured and yes when conscience allows without shouting either word. It looked like resilience that does not require someone else's collapse to prove itself. That realization humbled him further than any sanction or public reprimand had. Sanctions expose his actions. Her life exposed his illusions. The payback that no one had predicted showed itself clearly by now. He had tried to punish her into silence. Instead, he had been forced into honesty. He had expected her to return in defeat. Instead, she returned standing, not above him, not against him, but beside him as someone who no longer required his authorization to exist fully. The hierarchy he once assumed as natural had been rearranged by law, conscience, and time. Authority without justice had failed. Faith without fear had endured. Late one night, he wrote a letter he never intended to send. He simply needed to put thoughts into words without damaging them through pride and conversation. He wrote that he had confused loyalty to culture with loyalty to truth. He wrote that he had mistaken control for love. He wrote that his daughter's Christianity had not destroyed the family. His reaction to it had nearly done so. He folded the letter and placed it in a book in his study. The act of writing was enough. Sometimes confession is first practiced in private, so it can later be lived in public. She, at the same hour across the city, reviewed notes for an early session the next morning and set her alarm. No grand reflections. No lingering over the past. She had a schedule to keep. Before turning off the light, she prayed one short sentence she had come to rely on: keep me truthful and gentle. Those two qualities had guided her through exile, through pressure, through legal processes, through family meetings, and now through the quieter seasons of sustained life. Standing without permission had not made her hard. It had made her whole, and the structures that once sought to define her had been forced to adjust around a truth that would not bend. Her faith was real, her dignity was not negotiable, and love, without coercion,